The CEO canceled Daniel Carter's biggest deal of his life because he was 23 minutes late. Daniel stood inside the glass-walled boardroom, holding a worn leather folder, his shirt damp from the rain, his breathing uneven, while the CEO pushed the contract away as if it meant nothing. Daniel had spent 6 months preparing for that meeting, and the deal was supposed to save his struggling little business and give his 7-year-old daughter the stable life he had promised her. But the CEO had no idea that those 23 minutes had not been wasted in traffic, at a restaurant, or because Daniel had been careless. He had spent every one of them making a decision that would change someone else's life, and eventually his own. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that we should never judge someone before knowing their story, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Bright Heart. Your support helps us bring more stories that remind us that compassion can change a life. Daniel had never imagined himself standing in a billionaire's boardroom with an empty stomach and a box of children's medicine in his coat pocket. At 38, he was a single father raising his daughter Emma alone after losing his wife to an illness 3 years earlier. He worked harder than anyone around him, running a small company that supplied eco-friendly packaging to local businesses. It was not a glamorous business, but it was honest work, and Daniel had built it from almost nothing. His wife had once told him that their daughter should grow up, believing that ordinary people could still build extraordinary lives. And Daniel had carried those words with him through every difficult morning since her death. His company was now on the edge of collapse because a major client had disappeared, leaving unpaid bills, delayed salaries, and a growing mountain of debt. The contract with Sterling Corporation, one of the largest companies in the city, could change everything. If Daniel won it, he could save his employees, clear his debts, and finally stop waking up at 3 in the morning, wondering whether he would have to tell Emma that they might lose their home. The morning of the meeting began badly. Emma woke up with a high fever, her small face pale beneath the blanket. Daniel had already arranged for a neighbor to watch her, but when he tried to leave, Emma suddenly began shaking and became too weak to stand. Panic rushed through him. He called the neighbor, who immediately came over, but Daniel could not bring himself to walk away while his daughter was so sick. He rushed her to an urgent care clinic, where the doctor examined her and said she was suffering from a severe infection that required immediate medication. Daniel waited until the prescription was filled, made sure Emma was safely home with the neighbor, and then ran toward the train station. He kept checking his phone as he traveled, watching the minutes disappear. He knew exactly what being late could cost him, but every time he thought about leaving his daughter without medicine, he knew he would make the same choice again. When Daniel finally entered Sterling Corporation's headquarters, he was 23 minutes late. His hair was wet from the rain, his jacket was wrinkled, and his face carried the exhaustion of a father who had barely slept. The boardroom became silent as everyone turned toward him. At the head of the table sat Victoria Sterling, the company's young and famously demanding CEO. She had built her reputation on discipline, precision, and never accepting excuses. She looked at the clock, then at Daniel, and the disappointment on her face was immediate. Daniel tried to explain, but before he could finish, Victoria closed the folder containing his proposal and pushed it toward him. The deal was canceled. She told him that if he could not arrive on time for the most important meeting of his company's future, she could not trust him with a contract worth millions. Daniel stood there silently, feeling as though the entire room had watched his last hope disappear. He did not argue, beg, or blame anyone. He simply picked up his folder and walked out. In the elevator, Daniel finally allowed himself to close his eyes. His phone showed 3 missed calls from the neighbor. For a moment, fear overwhelmed his anger. He rushed home and found Emma asleep on the couch, her medicine beside her and a cool cloth across her forehead. The neighbor explained that the fever had started coming down. Daniel sat beside his daughter and held her tiny hand, tears quietly filling his eyes. He had lost the deal, but he knew he had not lost the thing that mattered most. He had chosen his daughter, just as he had promised her mother he always would. Meanwhile, Victoria Sterling remained in the boardroom reviewing the proposal Daniel had left behind. She was prepared to forget him completely, but something caught her attention. The proposal was unusually detailed, and several of the numbers showed that Daniel had voluntarily reduced his profit margin to keep the contract affordable. She asked her assistant to investigate his company. Within an hour, she learned that Daniel had been paying his employees on time, despite receiving late payments from clients. She discovered that he had refused to lay off 2 workers who were supporting disabled family members. Then she found an old community article about Daniel donating packaging materials to a food bank during a difficult year. None of it made sense with the careless businessman she thought she had seen that morning. Victoria ordered her assistant to find out why Daniel had been late. What she discovered made her sit completely still. Security footage showed Daniel running through the rain with a young girl in his arms before entering the clinic. Medical records confirmed that his daughter had been treated that morning for a serious infection. Then came the final detail. Daniel had not simply arrived late. He had turned down an earlier opportunity to send someone else to the meeting because he had stayed with his sick child until she was safely home. For the first time in years, Victoria felt ashamed of how quickly she had judged someone. She had spent her entire career believing that successful people were the ones who never allowed circumstances to interfere with responsibility. But she had forgotten that sometimes responsibility meant choosing another human being over business. The next morning, Daniel received an unexpected call from Sterling Corporation. He arrived at the headquarters expecting another formal meeting, but this time Victoria was waiting for him alone. She had his original proposal on the table, but beside it was another contract. Daniel could barely believe what he saw. Victoria was not offering to restore the original deal. She was offering him a contract worth 10 times more. Sterling Corporation wanted Daniel's company to become its long-term sustainable packaging partner, with a 5-year agreement and funding to expand his production facility. Daniel stared at the documents, unable to understand why the woman who had canceled his deal 24 hours earlier was now offering him more money than he had ever imagined. Victoria explained that she had made a mistake. She had judged his lateness without knowing the sacrifice behind it. She told him that a company could train someone to be punctual, but it could not easily teach integrity, loyalty, compassion, and the courage to put family before money. Those qualities were exactly what she wanted in a partner. Daniel accepted the contract, but he asked for one condition. He wanted part of the investment used to create paid emergency leave for his employees, so no parent would ever have to choose between keeping a job and caring for a sick child. Victoria agreed without hesitation. Over the following months, everything changed. Daniel's company grew from a struggling small operation into one of the region's most respected sustainable suppliers. His employees stayed because they knew their boss cared about them as people, not just workers. Emma recovered completely and returned to school. She often sat at her father's office drawing pictures while he worked, and one of those drawings eventually hung inside Daniel's new office. It showed a little girl holding her father's hand beneath a bright yellow sun. Victoria changed too. She began asking questions before making judgments. She started visiting employee families, listening to their problems, and creating policies that treated workers with dignity. The business became more successful, but she measured that success differently now. She had learned that numbers could tell you what someone earned, but they could never tell you what someone had sacrificed. One evening, months after the deal was signed, Daniel stood outside his office watching Emma run across the parking lot toward him. She jumped into his arms, laughing, and Daniel held her tightly. He looked back at the building he had nearly lost and remembered the day he had walked out of Victoria's boardroom, believing his dream was over. He realized that sometimes a closed door was not the end of the road. Sometimes it was simply the moment before someone finally discovered the truth behind your struggle. If this story touched your heart, please don't just watch and scroll away. Like the video, share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness still matters, and subscribe to Brightheart for more stories about second chances, courage, and the people who choose compassion when life gives them every reason not to. And before we end, I have a special request for you. Comment, "I believe in second chances," if you believe that we should understand someone's story before judging their actions. Because Daniel was 23 minutes late, but those 23 minutes revealed something far more valuable than punctuality. They revealed the heart of a father who refused to abandon his child when the world demanded that he choose business first. Victoria thought she was canceling a deal that morning. Instead, she discovered a man whose character was worth 10 times more than the contract she had rejected. And sometimes, the greatest opportunities in life do not come when everything goes according to plan. They come after the moment when you think everything has gone wrong, reminding you that one difficult chapter can never define the entire story.